feather, light, work, asking, answer, accepting, honoring, all we are, earth to star.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I love that song. And I love what he's implying there. I love the concept around engaging and befriending the dark parts of ourselves, or the parts that we associate with being less desirable. It's so easy. I got this from you, but it's so easy to shine bright and be vibrant and be around people and community and friends when we're feeling really good and we're feeling really amazing and we're in the flow and we're feeling healthy. It's much more of a challenge to not only be with others, but be with ourselves when the tough stuff comes, when the dark, when the density, when the challenging emotions, and how we navigate and what an interesting, contemplative, inspiring, and intriguing conversation to discuss the befriending of our dark parts.
Yeah, befriending the darkness, that's a new concept to me. Like you, I have been hyper-focused on the sun, moon, and stars as sources of inspiration. It was only recently when we had this big eclipse in October, I think, that I started asking myself, what is the purpose of darkness? What's the gift of the darkness? It was easy for me to see the gift of the sun and how it's an example of shining in life and, blessing up the world with its energy that way, radiating energy. And then I was wondering, what about the darkness? What about the dark part of me? Why does the darkness in me exist? How is that purposeful for my life to have darkness in my life? I actually started asking around because it was hard for me to identify that gift, the gift of the darkness. And I was able to come up with some really good answers to that question through some of the people I was asking. And I also unlocked a certain massive gift in myself by recognizing that I was, in a way, betraying myself. I was abandoning myself.
Yeah.
A certain part of myself was not being honored and respected and accepted because it was dark.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because when I was a kid, my favorite color was black. That was absurd to my dad. My dad was an elementary art teacher. He asked me what my favorite color was. I said black, and he said, "That's not a color." And honestly, that's true, but funny. There is a black crayon out there. So I consider it a color. It's my favorite art utensil is painting and drawing with black. Black has its purpose. I think it's really easy for us to see the purpose in it, and it might not be abundantly obvious, crystal clear what that purpose is. So we want to talk about it. We want to become friends with it. We want to accept that part of ourselves. We want to practice radical acceptance of all we are.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I've been sinking my teeth into some of Jerry and Esther Hicks' work, the Abraham work. And they always talk about this, and they usually express it in, we need the contrast. We need the contrast. And Esther will say, you do not know what you do like until you know what you don't like. And so it's an interesting, having that contrast and being able to feel through that and navigate that is one of the many benefits.
Yeah, definitely. That's, I think, where to start this conversation is looking at the interplay between dark and light. Of course, there's this whole spectrum of a middle ground, but let's focus on light and dark as just a way to wrap our heads and our hearts around this conversation. So if we look at the yin-yang symbol, we're talking about a visualization of the interconnection between light and dark. And within the dark, there is light. Within the light, there is dark. And then in the big picture, they play with each other and they flow and they create balance. They have a natural way of mutually depending on each other. If I look at it in a spiritual standpoint, I might say going into the darkness reminds me I need the light. Also, going into the lightness reminds me I need the dark. I need the dark. We need the dark. That's a radical truth. That's something new for me to perceive. How much I need that dark. How much my life depends on the dark. Every single day, a cycle presents itself with the sun rising and setting that presents this whole spectrum of light and dark in my life every single day. And I also experience moody spells. Sometimes I wake up with a dark cloud over my head. Sometimes I'm bright and cheerful and gleeful. And I'm not necessarily sure I'm responsible for that attitude. I do believe that attitude is a choice. I try to embrace an attitude of gratitude every day, even when I'm feeling gloomy. But sometimes this dark cloud appears over my head and I don't even know where it came from. And I don't necessarily need to know, but it's interesting that it's there. It's interesting that it happens. And there's only one culture that I've ever seen model massive acceptance and embrace of the darkness, and that's Lakota culture. There, they have a massive reverence for the darkness. We call great mystery Wakantanka, and Wakantanka is also interpreted great spirit, but great mystery is the proper interpretation in my understanding. And the mystery is exactly what the darkness is. It's the unknown. It's the what we see with our eyes closed. It's the truth, it's what's really there beyond what we might see or perceive with our five senses. There's something that exists that's alive, and I can sense that aliveness, and it's undefined. It doesn't have a look to it. I don't even know if it has a voice, but I still hear it, I don't even know if it has a physical form, but I see it in my imagination with my eyes closed in the dark. That darkness, if we look at it from one angle, it's the unknown. It's the mystery. On another level, if we look at it as what's the potential gift of the unknown, what's the potential gift of the mystery? Well, it's silent. It's still. It's a space for possibility to happen. For example, the soil under the earth is dark. And the soil, that dark, fertile ground, is exactly where we and the flowers root down and find our footing. It's a foundation. It's a place of potential for creation. It's a starting point, the dark. Isn't that what they say in the Bible even? Before there was the first light, there was dark. That's an interesting thing to consider.
Well, and if you think about it this way, the very, very beginning and our very first days and weeks of life, we're in a dark space. We're in the womb where there's no light. It's dark.
Yep. The cocoon is dark, where the caterpillar goes to disintegrate and reconfigure itself as a beautiful, colorful butterfly. The darkness is the tomb where our body lies to rest, where our soul passes on to another plane. The darkness is something meaningful even outside of the comparison between, luminance and lack of luminance. Darkness also means something emotionally.
Yeah.
Darkness means something in the music genres. Darkness means something in art. darkness means something. It's often given a derogatory, like a negative classification, or like a shadowy, it's associated with the shadow. But it's really healthy for us to examine those dark parts of ourselves, recognizing that they exist for a reason, and, contemplating what they're there for.
It's really quite exceptional too. It's quite a teacher. And I think when we get really down to the basics and the down to the reason why, we're asking, why do we have these experiences? And we can talk about a bunch of depth psychology and spirituality to kind of analyze this whole idea or understanding of this subconscious mind, in which something that we don't necessarily have, not all of us anyways, have access to. And it's a value. And he's saying it's a value when we see those dark parts, because it gives us like a little peek into what is on that other side that we're not consciously aware of. Because the reality is that as the natural born creators that we are, when we're creating our reality, we create from the whole field, but we only have cognitive, awake, aware access to less than half of it. So if we're finding challenges or uncomfortable situations in our lives, if we can approach the situation with grace and gratitude, we might be able to just hold our displeasure long enough to look on the other side of the veil and really see where it's coming from, or at least attempt to see, instead of the reaction to extinguish it, put it out, put light into it as soon as possible. We're big believers, really big believers in taking good care of ourselves. And that is 100% accurate. And at the same time, I can't speak for Kate, but I have a feeling he will agree. Being in that space, that discomfort, those heavy emotions, the rain cloud, the uncertainty, the whole hum, the lower frequency, if you will, being there and greeting that with a grateful, open heart, and really just trying to feel through that, really just giving ourselves a chance to express, giving ourselves a chance to be in that uncomfortable way, and the thing is, we don't want to stay there. We don't want to be taken over. We want to hold that yin and yang, that balance of having both active in our disposition, but giving it enough chance to breathe and show itself. So then, 9 times out of 10, at least in my experience, that's all it wants. It just wants to be witnessed. We just want to be witnessed in a lot of these heavy moments.
Yeah, for me, I like to get outside and dance in the rain. We live in a desert environment. It's really pleasant. And, it's a gift to the whole natural surroundings when the rain comes.
Mm-hmm.
And the rain comes with a force here. It rains violently and like a big blast, I've lived in some other places where it's even more rare to have a rainstorm. And I remember being in Wyoming, and I can still remember today the fragrance of desert rain on the sagebrush. And it's a delightful gift to have that rain, but it comes with a storm, and it comes with darkness. It comes with those scary thunderbolts and lightning. And here, we live close to the coast in Texas. We can get showered by some hurricane winds and hurricane storms once in a while. And, the darkness does have its scary sides to it. I imagine most of the murders probably happen in the dark and the burglaries. But
oh my gosh. Scorpio.
Yeah, I understand that the Scorpios are supposed to have a higher capacity to handle darkness.
Yeah, and I think it's more, and this is, of course, astrology. If you agree and align with the system, I find it to be really fun and exciting and life enriching. And most times I do find it to be accurate personally. But it's not only that they can handle it and they have the capacity for it, they like it. They seek it.
Well, I've also heard that in addition to the scorpion being a symbol of the Scorpio, the eagle is also a symbol of the Scorpio. And, the scorpion has its disposition of holding a big giant stinger at all times, ready to strike. And so does the eagle with its talons. But both of them have their grace about them and their beautiful way of, catching a bigger picture perspective, whether it be from above or below.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, while we're on the subject, we have these preconceived notions about individual signs, but each sign has a really, it's a spectrum and where we are and how we're healed and, where we're dysregulated and when we're healed. So, I mean, I think there's beauty in all of it. I'm honored and privileged to walk behind or beside. I'm honored and privileged to walk behind a man with such depth. Did I say behind again? I'm honored and privileged to walk beside a man with such depth.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting that depth in me. And, you mentioned the spectrum of healing, and it's true. I don't know anybody who's just happy-go-lucky every second of the day, always living in bliss and joy. My friends have depth to them. My friends have a dynamic range of emotions. They have a whole spectrum of ways of showing up in the world, and I love them for it. I love them for the parts of themselves that get dysregulated sometimes. Of course, I love the petals that they are, but also the thorns. And I feel like I, learn to, as much as I learn to love and respect those thorns that I carry, I learn to love and respect them when I see them in other people too. I not only respect them, but I relate with them.
I think it gives us a chance to give ourselves permission. I think there's a standard, I think it's just in our culture. And just in our culture, as we get older, there's a standard that we're trying to navigate as how we show up in our communities and our families and at work. And we're trying to navigate who we are and what we should be and this and that. And I think it's so beautiful to have a community that's raw and authentic. And we're really blessed to have a very raw, authentic community, because then it gives us permission to be raw and authentic in whatever we're feeling. And even in those uncomfortable moments, I won't get into too much detail, but recently you've had, or I could say we, because we're a family, like we've had some uncomfortable moments navigating certain situations. And the one thing that is so beautiful is that everyone in the family is really authentic. Like, when someone's being bothered because they're going to tell you, when it's a challenge and you're going to navigate it that way. And it may feel a little bit more intense and it may feel like a little bit more to carry. And you may feel a little bit more of the rain cloud, but I'd much rather feel the rain cloud, navigate the rain cloud, than to have no idea that there's a problem at all because someone's not speaking up.
Yeah, as for me, I lean more toward the preferring not to have the conflict.
Yeah.
I recently got
that's true.
called out by a friend, and it didn't feel good. It felt totally unnecessary and useless to be, harping on a thing that happened in the past that was not even an issue. But I do appreciate, when people are willing to talk about things. And I for me, I'm going so fast with life that I don't necessarily even know what's right and true and best for me a lot of the time. I'm just kind of like flying by the seat of my pants. So when I get, confronted with something, sometimes it gives me a chance to really speak up for myself, and you get to know what I really value, what I really see, what my passion is. Vocalizing it helps me to like grasp it and really sit in it and feel the resonance or dissonance with what I'm saying. Until I speak it out loud, I might not even know. I might not have even processed what I actually think about it.
Well, and I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference between, in a sacred family structure, being able to communicate about things that are really important, like education and home location and, finances. Those things are really important. They're very evident in our lives. There's a different side of things when, that's not the case, when the topics are, finger pointing and discomfort. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. I don't find there to be a whole lot of value in confrontational for the sake of almost like my ego. I try to navigate. If I've got something new and fresh or something that's challenging me, I'll communicate it. But something that, I find that to be a waste of energy, honestly.
Yeah. Speaking of waste of energy, that's exactly the point that I also wanted to get to. Uselessness. When we talk about, light and dark, it's easy to see the purpose, the usefulness of the radiant sun, for example, the light that helps us to see. And it's a little bit harder to identify the purpose, the function of the darkness. But of course, the darkness is when we sleep. It's when we, in my mind, go home to that place where we really are. We heal. Healing happens in the dark, Restoration, rest happens in the dark. So along those lines, it's really interesting to think of the way some people classify evil as darkness, They almost use those words synonymously. But I don't believe in evil. And I understand darkness has a purpose to it. So why would people associate darkness with evil? It's an interesting thing. I think that love is the driving force behind every single thing that exists, even the darkness, even those dark thoughts, even those horrible, ugly thoughts that we carry, or those dark ways we treat ourselves. I think there's some kind of love motivation that's rooting itself behind all those things, behind the fear, behind the doubt, behind the grief, behind all these things is love. Love showing itself in all these, a whole spectrum of different ways. And if we can grasp that high level concept, then we can learn to accept and appreciate those things when they show up. If a fear presents itself, maybe there's a reason behind that is love. Maybe it's because something in us wants to live and thrive and stay away from that fearful thing. Like maybe it's the edge of a cliff. If a fear is showing up, if it's a doubt, maybe it's because some part of our self-preservation in our love wants us to take a step back and, be safe, be sheltered, be in our own element for a little while. And then we can regroup and come forward with, a resolution to that self-doubt. When I see a shadow, I want to do the work of grasping it. I want to do, number one, the work of acknowledging it, right? I want to acknowledge that dark thing. I want to acknowledge that dark thought. I want to acknowledge that dark cloud over my head. And then I notice when I do that, the weight of it almost always goes away on its own. I don't even have to do anything about it. Just acknowledging it's there, breathing in the existence of that darkness without judgment, that makes the power, the pain, the frustration, the force of it, the rattling of it dissipate somehow. I don't know how it works, but I witness that happening all the time.
Well, I have a suggestion. I don't know, but my suggestion is when you do that, you show it love. You're giving it some space. The acknowledgement is essentially love and compassion instead of shutting it down like it's used to being shut down. And that's why it's coming up in the first place. You sending it an acknowledgement is love and compassion. So what you're actually, and what my assumption is just an assumption, is you're actually transcending or transforming that frequency from something really potent and dark to a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I think it does take the charge away. It transmute a thing. I read about this ascended master called Saint Germain, and he champions this visualization technique called the violet flame.
Yeah.
this is a form of shadow work where we're contemplating something heavy and, burdensome and ugly and upsetting. And we're bringing it to a source of light in order to up-level it, in order to ascend, in order to reach a higher vibration in ourselves, in order to accept, in order to embrace, in order to, reinterpret what that thing is in a way that serves us. And I venture to say that all these dark thoughts serve us in some way. If we can acknowledge them and accept them, then we can really integrate that gift in them. But until we do that, we're numb, dumb, and dim to the gift in it. It's going to go right over us. We're going to miss it. We're going to, potentially create, in the worst case scenario, a dis-ease. And hopefully that's not true for us. Hopefully we don't have to have like life-changing consequences of our unwillingness to look in the dark. But honestly, there's a real source of freedom. There's a real source of liberation and healing that happens when we honor what is, when we accept what is, when we acknowledge, embrace, recognize the gift in everything happening. And life is happening for us for a reason, for our evolution, for our ascension. These life situations, no matter how heavy, how dark, there's a reason why they're happening. There's a reason, there's a growth potential in them. They're feeding our, evolution of ourselves in some way. That's the way I see it. It's hard to grasp that in all times. Sometimes life is going so fast and I don't see the gift in these challenging situations. But more and more as I practice, I'm learning to see with a soft gaze, with non-judgment, recognizing that things are happening for a reason. The world is turning in my favor. The world wants me to grow and thrive and prosper and bring my gifts, bear my fruit.
Absolutely. And I think it's also pretty common to be able to see everything that's happening around you through that space of that eagle eye, that, above that God's eye view, and see how it's coming. It's very easy for me to share my positive takes on what's going on in your world, but a lot more challenging for me to do that for myself in those moments. I'm getting better at it, but,
Cool. Can we talk about that? Can we dig into that?
Yeah.
Would you like to unpack that?
Sure. And then, the example, can I share the example that made me think of it? So it had to do with you. And we were in the car and I don't remember, you had lost all that work. You had done all this work. He was working so hard and he had just completed all this. And I was in the car and I gave we were talking about the disappointment around the loss of this project he had been working on. It just crashed, didn't save. And I was really trying to anchor in, and he was really grateful for anchor into the positive side and like why. And he was open to that. But in that moment, he just needed to be what he was. And it was really actually beautiful. He was like, let me just let it be a loss for a second. And then he quickly transitioned. But it was really good lesson to, it's both and, right? It can be transmuted, but it can also, we don't want to extinguish our feelings either.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just to give a little bit more context to what she's saying, I'm an artist. I was working on an art project and I was gathering all these assets to be able to fashion into this art. And I was working diligently for so many hours to assemble this, basically a worksheet that I could take tools from and then run with. And then my computer crashed and I lost all that information. And so I was really upset. Not only did I waste all that time, but I was right on the edge of being able to do the best part, which is make the art. Before that, I was just gathering the tools. Now I'm ready to finally make the art, which is exactly the point of the whole thing. And now I have to wait and start all over and, think about what could have been. And it was a moment of grief. I was frustrated, but I was also experiencing loss. And I happened to lose a loved one just in this last week too. So it was another angle of loss. I really love my uncle and he just passed. And so I was feeling lost, and she's trying to help me out because she's just cool like that and wants to help people. And so she suggested that I might try to find the positive in it. Maybe next time it'll be even better because you'll already have, the know-how to get what you need to get done, and it'll be smoother and faster and stronger, that type of thing. And that's a beautiful idea. And sometimes, we need that motivation to get us to, get to that attitude of gratitude, right? But this time I was like, yes, and I really just want to be in the frustrated feeling right now. Right now, where I'm at is feeling loss, and I just want to honor that right now. And she was gracious enough to, let me be there and do my processing.
And, it's interesting because you said, you were dealing with all that loss, and there was so much going on that week. There was so much you were navigating that week. There was really uncomfortable situations coming from every angle that week. And I don't think that you had the chance to really process a lot of it. So I'm wondering if it was just, divinely orchestrated for you to be able to do exactly what you wanted to do, which was sit in those emotions, so that instead of stuffing them down, you were able to do exactly what you said in this process.
Yeah, and I literally got sick. I don't know what to say about that. I don't want to make it into any kind of a big thing or like a blanket statement, but I did get sick. I consider myself really healthy, and I almost never get sick. It had been more than a year since I had the sniffles or anything. And, 1 year I had COVID about 4 times at least. And then, the next 2 years, nothing, no sickness. And then here I got nailed by a sickness. I just had so much emotional distress, so many upset feelings of loss. And this time I didn't shy away from that sickness. I did, medicate myself with the daily dosage of vitamin D and got my sun, got my vitamins, but I didn't do anything to try to overcome the sickness. I just rode out that sickness like it was a passing storm. It was, here comes the darkness again, and I persevered through the darkness. I didn't even have a gloomy spell about it. I just went right through it with a soft gaze, and it was where I needed to be. And I find even the gift in that sickness.
Well, in all honesty, if you hadn't started to feel like that, you probably would have just kept working.
Yeah.
You needed a break.
Yep. That's a common, error that I've made in my life, is numbing out and powering through and distracting myself from real feelings by working. And, I'm working on working less now. working about working.
Well, and I think what happens is really wise people who have really good work ethic, we decide to indulge ourselves in the work that we love. So then we get to come through this back door and say, well, these are passion projects, and still not take breaks.
True.
But that's okay too, because, we're here on this planet to have these tangible experiences and express ourselves in beautiful ways. So
there's another angle of darkness right there. The self-importance, the desire to be something wonderful, to create wonderful gifts to heal the world. These are kind of like illusionary visions of grandeur. And if we're not careful, we might get a little too imbalanced with those bright, shining rays of light that we might think we are. We might get a little too carried away with the desire to radiate and bring love and shower the people with love. We might be actually missing a bigger picture perspective that calls for us to bring our dark cloud for some reason, to, scatter some rain on a situation.
Well, we talked about earlier, when we witness others be able to step into that and really honor themselves when they're rain cloudy, it gives everybody permission. It gives people permission to be authentic with where they're at,
Yeah, and permission is a really big part of it, because in our culture, where is it safe to express anger? Is there anyone that we see in the world that is expressing furious anger that we're like, hey, good one, guy? No, there's no place for that. There's just not a place for someone to be, thrashing about and yelling. It's totally undesirable, and it's a part of who we are. How can we reckon with that? It's unbelievable that there's no place for that. Maybe it's the sports, maybe it's the athletic center. I don't know, but I really detest hearing someone yell. And I don't know what to do about that. I recognize grief exists in me. It's only been in these recent grieving rituals that I've even known that there's a safe place for me to go howling, wailing, crying in this world too, So I don't know. Maybe there's something we can do. Maybe there's, a service we can offer the world someday by holding space, creating a space
Absolutely.
for people to process those hard, dark thoughts that way.
Sacred rage processing. It's quite an art. And also, too, it's a delicacy. It's kind of like playing a piano. You don't want to stay on the one note too long. You want to keep your melody flowing, But I think you make a really good point. You said, where is it okay, like, to keep howling and to howl and call out and stuff? And I think if we have activities in our lives where we get little glimpses of that and we can kind of let it go little by little as it comes up, that's why we really love ecstatic dance.
Yeah.
Because we do that regularly. We'll have to do a whole episode on ecstatic dance, giving ourselves an opportunity to move and express non-verbally, but through audible sounds and noises and movement, express ourselves on a weekly basis. So we're not just keep filling up the cup. So I might get a howl out and I might not be in the center of my rage, but I may get like some noise out so that if I am in rage, it doesn't have to come out so like earth-shattering because I'm only a quarter full. I'm not like full to the rim where I'm going to like throw myself on the ground. I can just give out a little 1-2 and feel better. It's another way to process.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if everyone has access to ecstatic dance, but I know everyone has access to jogging. And jogging is one of those fundamental ways that we can move energy. We can move heavy energy, light energy.
Yeah.
All the kinds of dark energy that we need to move. And, we not only give ourselves the gift of moving that energy and potentially transmuting that energy into something favorable for us, but we also have the gift of aerobic exercise that, charges up our organs, gets
blood,
that oxygen in the deepest part of our lungs, beats our hearts, that simple action of exercise, that's where I begin. That's the only thing I know actually is if I'm, carrying some heavy, hard energy like that, I better try to express it and move it in some way if I can. I can move it to a certain degree in my mind a lot of the time just by observing it, recognizing it, giving it its place to exist. But sometimes I get a little bit stuck and I might have like a repeat of upset thoughts coming through, might be keeping me up at night. And so exercise helps me a lot.
Well, the other thing about exercise that's really important, and he was just talking about like that gets the blood pumping and the heart pumping and gets the circulatory, we oxygenate our blood, but it also stimulates the operation of the lymph system. And the lymph system is really important. We don't talk about it nearly as much, but the lymph system actually gets rid of waste out of our system, gets toxins out of our system. And so that's like a literal function of what we're trying to emotionally do. So it's beautiful. The lymph system doesn't get any activity. It doesn't have its own organ, its own heart to pump. It needs us to move it. So it really goes in sync with being able to transmute and move through that energy to activate that system on a physical level as well. And these are little tips and tricks around what we call embodiment, allowing the body to support emotional shifts and changes and getting these shifts, changes all the way down to a cellular level. And it's true, not everybody does have a space for ecstatic dance in their community, but you probably have a kitchen or a living room and you probably have a favorite song. And so you can definitely spend 3 to 4 minutes a day and put it on your favorite song and just dance as if no one is watching, or who cares if everyone's watching. And if you get up there and you're not a real big lover of music and you really don't know what to dance to, I could give some suggestions. Just ask me.
Yeah, I think we should give some suggestions because
Okay.
there's a whole range of ways we can move energy, and some songs are dark and some of them are light.
Yeah.
Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin might be the obvious place to start for some people, but then there's a song called Worry Shoes, and it's a children's song, I think. It appeared on this movie called Where the Wild Things Are, and it's so sad. It makes me cry. And it feels so good to have that refreshing, cleansing cry once in a while. So that to me is a really big medicine song. And there are others. I have a friend who's a drummer in my band, and he processes grief through heavy metal music, death metal music. And I understand death metal music is really popular in nations like Norway and Sweden. Those are some of the smartest cultures in the world and the most like aware. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to like processing grief.
Go full circle.
Emoting that way.
Yeah. My personal favorite is if I'm dealing with like rage, I really am blessed enough not to have a whole lot of that. I mean, especially not like in my personal situation. If I'm going to really think on that, it really has a lot more to do with like maybe some of the powers that be and our organization of our country, to be completely honest. But if I'm going to deal with rage, I personally like Rage Against the Machine.
I love that stuff.
It's really good. It used to be super soothing in a really rough time and a young time. And I don't know if it's because I know all the words or if it's like the sick bass in the background that I feel in my body.
Name.
Yeah.
That one's amazing.
Yeah. And Cabe and I are some of the most spiritual people. We really don't even consume things that are in that light, but it's so therapeutic to just honor and welcome those shadows when you need it. And they have this really graceful way of being quiet and then getting loud, and it just lets you like access stuff.
And I've heard this. I don't know if this is true. Does this ring true for you? Anger is really unexpressed sadness. And that really rings deep.
Me too.
That rings resonant and true for me. And so there is the keys to the kingdom right there, allowing ourselves to process sadness. We don't ever have to even think about anger. We don't have to think about rage if we'll just allow ourselves to be sorrowful, to have grief, to, express emotions on one level. Then we don't have to resort to some radical extreme like yelling at someone.
Yeah.
Or, punching someone.
Really good call on that. And I think that's why having those songs like Cabe's expressing the sorrowful songs that like jog tears in your eyes, like that's how you really you wanted to get there. I remember when I was going through my separation and then into my divorce, I intentionally pulled out like the high school waterworks just because I was kind of numb. I was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And in those moments, as I was like kind of in those spaces of not knowing, I knew there was stuff that had to move. So
I've heard it advised to, scream into a pillow or punch a pillow, but I actually think that's counterproductive. I think that's, expressing something that we don't want. It's practicing something that we don't want. Practicing something that we want might be having the self-control to look at a real situation and breathe it in and process it and cry for it. But does punching anything ever serve us? Does yelling at something ever serve us? Only in extreme situations of flight or fight do we ever have to resort to that. So practicing that is totally useless unless we're training to become a grizzly bear wrestler or whatever it is.
And I think it has to do with like where you come to this awareness, right? Like if you have so much unprocessed stuff, you might actually need those methods to get it out because you haven't been taught, or it's just so built up. You like have to get it out. But if we have this awareness, that's why we love these podcasts, because if we have this awareness as a community earlier on in life, we doesn't have to get to that point.
Yeah, it's true, that good old fashioned analogy of the champagne bottle shaken up and then it's explosive.
Yeah, because you just, again, if we don't feel it, right? And that's an access point. That's how I think they're doing that. And I do agree with what you're saying. But I think some people are just like they don't have another method. Although, I mean, we could make suggestions. You could do, if you were going to do some martial arts or get in the ring and do some boxing, that would be constructive because it would be healthy for your body. You wouldn't be risking as much of an injury and you'd be able to process in that way. So I know that you can up level those things.
Yeah, but it's true. I shouldn't judge, and I should have acceptance and tolerance of those people being where they are. You know, some people are just have it modeled that we yell at each other whenever there's a conflict.
Right.
Some people have it modeled at a young age that violence is part of the way we process things.
Right.
And, you know, whether or not the nonviolent way is more sophisticated, it's really desirable for me, but I'm kind of like had a privileged existence compared to some people who have had really challenging life situations with models that have been unlike my own. So I recognize that there are other people and they have other ways of processing darkness in different ways too.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point. Like we've been lucky enough to have parents who have, you know, modeled things for us and take care of us. I mean, I can't speak for Kate, but I could assume that neither one of us have ever really like been that utterly betrayed by someone who's supposed to be caretaking. I can imagine that there has got to be a ton of rage when you are betrayed by a parent or caretaker.
We have really close friends that have been victims of terrible traumatic experiences under the care of, you know, a guardian.
Yeah.
And that is really unfortunate. You know, when we talk about that deep grief and that deep anger that's rooted so deep in the sorrow that we carry for so many years, sometimes I'm crying about something that's 20 years old.
Yeah.
I can have empathy for some people who have had it harder than me, way harder than me. And they might be farther removed from their tools than I am. And, you know, God have mercy on those people.
You've been through some hard stuff. It might just be a different flavor of hard stuff.
Yeah.
Cabe's made it out of some pretty radical situations. I want to honor you for that.
Yeah, you know, if I look at some of those hardest experiences I've experienced in life, tragic losses and, you know, devastating failures, then I can, you know, remember the way it feels. It almost stirs up tears in me now, just on a surface level, contemplating those things. But in the big picture, I recognize even in my own life, there's a reason why those happened. Mm-hmm. There's something in, I can recognize a certain grace in myself. I can recognize a life path now between that incident in the past and this present place where I am now. And I can be grateful for this person who I am now. And I can recognize that some of those stepping stones, no matter how bad they hurt, they were necessary for me to get to this place. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm enlightened, not that I'm far evolved, not that I'm always in my ego-minded state, but I'm a pretty wonderful person. Mm-hmm. I respect myself. I love and accept myself.
Yeah. And that's why we navigate the darkness.